All right, so before I go over some of the tools that we covered last Wednesday, there's something I saw in a few students' projects that I really want to illustrate. Maybe there was a confusion as far as what I was explaining, but it goes back to like the very beginning. So when you copy your text in and you end up linking all the different text boxes through the entire design, you do that to see how much text you have to work with, what sections can you kind of break out, and then you kind of then make copies of the text into individual text boxes that's more manageable. Now, once you start designing, so right now I'm in that step 2, right? So I have my abstract sitting here in its own separate text box. So when I select this, it's sitting all by itself. But then the introduction carries over to 3, but it doesn't continue anywhere else, right? So I have these in basically 2 separate links. So these 3 are linked together. This one's sitting by itself. Now, this is fine if I end up having a design that allows me to have this all work well, right? Now, once I start moving around my design and start coming up with different ideas, if let's say I no longer want to have this sitting on an image sitting here in the bottom of some graph, and I don't want an image here. I now want an image to basically sit, on the right-hand side of this entire document. So that means this is now going to stretch all the way down. And I have this here just so this way I can see where everything is going to be. If I bring this out right to the edge and send it to the background, I now need to remove something else to get this text up into here. So that means I am now going to be moving this up. So this image is now going to be a bit shorter, and I'm going to move these up. Right, so I'm moving these up, and because I had them broken the link, I now need to relink it. Right, so I now need to have introduction drop back underneath with this. All right, so even though I don't have a little red symbol here, I can still click that bottom square. So when I click it, you can see I still have a bunch of text sitting here, right? Even though there's no overset text. Once I click inside here, it relinks this with that, the rest of the other text box. So now I'm going to hit a return, and you can see I now moved everything away from this, and now I have this sitting here and here. And I can now delete this text box. So now I have these 3 linked. You do not want to do this. All right, so I have this here. I'm now going to drop this down. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to move this over, drop that down, and then move this over here. All right, you do not do this, right? Because you want to make sure that this box here is even and level with this box, so connected. I want to make sure that this spacing is consistent with all the other spacing. All right, so you have to relink. So when you break things out and you're starting to redesign and moving things around, you can't keep things separate. All right, you only keep things separate if everything is sitting there in the design that you want. Right, so if I have this here and I know my abstract is going to be this size, I now want my introduction to basically be that size too, right? So if I start moving things around, it keeps these separate, but it's only keeping them separate because I'm not having them interconnect with one another. As soon as I decide to have this become part of this, I now need to relink it. I can't keep them all separate. All right, so that's one thing I want to cover very quickly, that I saw a few students that did the right thing at the beginning, linking everything, and then did the next thing of breaking everything out, which is perfect, and it makes it a little bit easier to design. But then once you start working your ideas out, you have to be careful that you're not, kind of patching together all these individual text boxes in a column. If it's a column of text, it's got to be in the same text box. All right. All right, so now I want to go over what we had covered in the Wednesday class. So the first thing was exporting to a PDF to print. All right, so we have our entire design done. We go up to File. We're going to go to Export. and then we are going to select print, right? You have two options when it comes to PDF, interactive and print. So we're going to hit PDF print. We're going to keep it in that same box. We're going to hit save. And then right here, export as pages or spreads. We want to make sure we have it selected as spreads. Then we want to click on marks and bleeds. We want crop marks, and then utilize bleed settings, because you can see we already have the red line, so we have our bleeds, and we want that information pulled in. All right. Then we hit export. It's going to take us a little time, and then it's right here. So we're going to click this, and now you can see it's put together as spreads, right? We go through, you can see our trim marks, we have our fold line, and then the rest of the trim marks. If you have anything bleeding off, you need to make sure that it's going off beyond the trim marks, okay? So that's how you would export and then print. So remember, when you're printing, especially for right now, you're just printing single-sided spreads, and then just putting it together by folding and then cutting it off, all right? All right, so the next thing we covered were styles, all right? So we have our my paragraph text. I'm going to change this to be a little bit different. I have this and this. I got this. All right, so I have a couple different things happening for my text layout, and what I want to do now is set up my styles. So I'm going to go to my character styles right here. Right now there's none, and you want to make sure you have a design before you start doing your character styles. All right, so you select your text, and then I come over here. I'm going to hit new. It's just going to give me a blank character style 1. I'm going to double click it. I'm going to change it to copy text. And then if I click on the basic format, you can see whatever the information that was used is pulled in. All right. So now this is why you have to design or come up with a design before you end up having your styles, because if nothing was changed from default, then it stays as a blank. All right. So right now, because I'm using regular, the style is not going to be pulled in because that is the standard. So it pulls in my Helvetica. Because it's not 12 points, it's pulling in 10 points. All right. I hit OK. Then I'm going to do the same for this. So I'm going to create a new style. And this is going to be section headers. And now if I click on this, you can see because it wasn't regular and I use bold, it's not the default. So that pulls it in for my actual design, for the style rather. All right. I hit OK. And now I'm going to click on this. And because it's using this style, I'm just simply going to click section headers. And then I'm going to pull in all of this, select copy text, and then this text here is going to be my pull quote. All right, hit OK. So now you can see right here, here's all this. So when we go to the next page, we would just simply select the text that we want and then click and then click. So it pulls in and it allows everything to have all of those same attributes across the entire document. So now if we want to make a change and say we print and we're like, you know what, maybe we don't want the regular anymore, maybe we want something else, or maybe the bold was just a little bit too harsh, we can double click on this. We can go to preview so you can see what's happening to our changes. And then I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say I really only want regular now. And you can see that changes. And then maybe we want light. You can see that changes across both of them. All right. Now, if I was to change it just to one of these, right? So you can see there's nothing sitting here. If I came up here and said, you know what, I no longer want that bold, I want that to be light, and now it changes, there's going to be a little symbol that pops up next to your style. That lets me know that there is something different about this style that I'm using that should be the same as this. There are times that maybe you needed to change something else, right? So let's say we didn't want to change anything too drastic, but there was something wrong with the the kerning a bit, right? So we're going to come up here. We just want to tweak the tracking, something very subtle. And because we're treating this and we're increasing it, nothing's happening, right? Now this goes back to what I said before. You need to have all of your attributes in set before you can create any of your styles. So now if I click on my headers and I go to my basic here, you can see there was nothing unique about tracking. All right. So even though this right here is changing the tracking from this one, because it was never set up, it's not going to show anything that it's letting me know that is different. All right. So then when I come back in here, you can see, because now I just added it, there is a symbol. All right. So you want to be able to have as much information in here as you can. All right. So if we always keep everything at auto, we're going to keep it optical case. We're going to do normal. You go through, the more you have in here, then the more that it's going to keep everything consistent when you end up changing it. So this way, if you change anything about it, it will then give you that little symbol. All right. All right. So now colors, swatches. We have very few swatches that InDesign gives us to start with. This is it. All right. So what you do, you click on color. You're going to have basically the same kind of information that you have in Illustrator. You're going to have your cmyk handles here. Remember, we're designing for print, so it should be in cmyk. We're going to figure out what our color is that we're looking for. Once we have that color set, we go into swatches and we create a new swatch. So now if that is the color that we're going to make, we're going to go through and then have that sitting there for that color swatch. If we want to change the color itself and we end up changing the color, you can see wherever that swatch is used across the entire design is now going to be changed. This is very useful, even with a smaller document like what we're working on, right? We really only have 12 pages, but you print it out, and you're looking at the color. It's going to look one way on your screen, and it's going to look very different when you're looking at it on print. So you're going to want to be able to make changes relatively easy, right? You don't want to sit there and spend an hour just going through and finding, all right, where are all those colors across my document? Set it up. Make sure you have that swatch across everything that you're using. And then when you need to make a minor adjustment, right? Sometimes you print it and it's like, you know what? It's just a little bit too magenta in there. So I'm going to pull back the magenta slightly, hit OK, and then try a test print. All right. This way you can make that change very fast and then you'll be all set. All right. Then the next thing was looking at images, right? So when we bring an image in, if we're pulling images from the web, it's going to be low res. All right. Here's a couple images. It's a JPEG. You do not want to bring JPEGs into your file. All right. So I have this image here. Now, if you already have boxes set up and you drag and you end up dropping it on top of a box, it's going to go inside that box. If you end up dropping it outside an area, you'll be able to click and drag for that box itself. If you just simply click on the screen, it will create the size that will print at what you have it set at. All right, so you can see this image is huge, going all the way across my 2 pages, but it's low res. So what we need to do is we need to go into Photoshop. I'm going to right click, open with. Eventually. There we go. All right, so first thing you do is you can see it's RGB. Remember, RGB is screen, cmyk is print. So we're going to go up to image, go to mode, and then drop down to cmyk. All right, I'm going to hit OK. Next thing we need to do is make sure we take out of the high res, the low res rather. So we're going to go to image size, And with this, there's a couple things that happen, right? So generally you have resample checked off. So you have the proportions of the width and height, all right? You can see our resolution is at 72, which is low res. The overall size of our document is 36 megs, all right? So at a low res, it's going to print 42 inches by 42 inches. We need this to be 300. So when we deselect resample, you will have 3 lines that connect the width, height, and resolution. So the 3 of them are connected to one another. Now pay attention to above, the image size. It's 36 megs. That's the amount of information that is being put into our document, all right? So with these all selected, we're going to go to 300, and you will see the 36 stays the same, all right? The inches, the physical size that this can print, drops down because we're putting more information into the square inch, right? So 300 dpi is dots per inch. So if you make a square and you had 300 bits of information, that's the resolution. 72 obviously is less. It's a quarter of that size. All right, so once you have this all set, click OK. Then we're going to go up to File, go to Save As. And then if it's a full image, we're going to save it as a tiff. And then hit Save. And then we can close this out. All right, so now we're going to pull the tiff in. And then we want, if we just click on the screen, that's the largest that it can print at. If we click and drag across, it will then fall into whatever that is. If we want it to sit inside that shape, we simply drop it into that shape. All right. When that comes in this way, then you could come up to Object, go to Fitting, and then you have a couple different options in here, right? So we want the fit content to frame because we already have our frame set. We don't want to have it fit frame to content because then it's going to push our frame out to the size of the image itself. So I want a proportion, I'm sorry. Here we go. So now we can see that sits with inside. We click on the little disc and now I can pull and then meet the end. So this way then we now have that sitting inside a square that we wanted. All right. Now, the other object that you want to be looking at is links, right? So in here, when you have something selected, you will have a lot of information sitting in here. It'll tell you what the file is and make sure that you're in cmyk. And then over here is the most important. It tells you what the DPI and what the effective DPI is. So because it's a little bit smaller than what it could have printed as, it goes higher than 300 DPI. It is completely fine to allow that to sit much higher than 300. What we don't want is to have this image sitting like this, that then you can just see, because we went beyond what the capabilities of that file was, it's lower than that 300 DPI threshold. So you always want to make sure that this image stays at least 300 or more, okay? All right, so the last thing that we kind of covered was looking at the image sizes of what we would want. So let's say I am looking for an image that's going to be this size, right? Or I'm looking for something that's going to bleed off the page. I'm going to bring this to the gutter, bring this to the bleed. So I'm looking at this image. Let me put this in inches, put that in inches, good. So right now I'm looking at 8 1/8 by say 4.5, all right? So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go back into my Photoshop. I'm going to create a new document. And then I'm going to change this to inches. It is 8 1/8. Oops, why do you keep changing that? All right, 8.125. And then the height was 4.4 something. Change this to 300. I can make this right now. Basically, it doesn't matter the color mode at the moment because we're trying to just get the size at the moment. Why did that keep changing? All right, and then go 300 and then hit create. Okay, so now that we have the actual file itself in Photoshop, I can come up in here, go to image size, and then you can see my resolutions right here. If I deselect this, I can select pixels. So then you can see it right here as well. But right here, you'll see the dimensions, and you'll see this. If you have this selected, you actually cannot select pixels. So just deselect this if you want to be able to see the pixels side by side. And then when you're looking for an image at 300 dpi, you're looking at something for 2438 that will fit this space and be high enough res for printing. All right, so that's the way you can find certain images, whether you're looking for images on the web or you're buying stock photography. That, you know, the higher the res the image, the more expensive the image becomes. All right, so that's everything that we covered during that class. I have one more video that I will do after this that kind of, you know, capped off this project. But yeah, good luck.